Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Process Over Prize podcast. Before we get into the podcast today, I want to go over ways to support the podcast. The first and the quickest way is to support by going to the Process Over Prize podcast description. At the bottom, you'll find a link that says support this podcast. The second would be going to our website, which is www.larutina.com, and then you can find an item you'd like to purchase to support the podcast that way. Without further ado, let's get into the podcast. What's up, everybody? Today I want to talk about something that I've been asked about a lot recently, and that's training and jiu jitsu. What I mean by that is a lot of people ask me, hey, how often do you train? How intense are you when you train? Do you still do strength training? Do you do cardio? All of the above. Today I'd like to talk about, what works for me. My plan may not work for everybody else. This has been my approach to it in the time that I've been training, and it's worked well for me, whether it be just kind of training as a hobbyist or increasing training a little bit to prepare for a tournament. But for me, I try to train when I'm, consider myself a hobbyist or when I'm not preparing for a tournament. I shoot for 3 times a week. My schedule for jiu-jitsu now, I train Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you train here at Koa Martial Arts in Stafford, Virginia, you know that I teach the no-gi class from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. So I am there on Tuesday and Thursdays teaching. And then immediately following, we do open mat. We do some sparring sessions, and the intensity of that can vary depending on how many people stick around or how long we roll. The third day that I train when I'm kind of just maintaining is on Saturday. I'm a huge fan of encouraging people to train on Saturdays. Most gyms, Saturday is open mat. It's not a class per se. Maybe you may work on some techniques off to the side but with somebody there, but there's no formal class for the most part on Saturdays. Saturday, you kind of go in, you work on whatever technique, positions you've been working on throughout the week. It's your chance to go in there and do some sparring to see if it works, see if you need to tweak things here and there. So that's my schedule. I'm actually preparing for a couple tournaments coming up. So, I've stepped it up to 5 days a week. So the additional days a week is normally a Monday morning or Monday evening. Same thing, Friday morning or Friday evening here at Koa. That works for me. The place I'm training at now, I am fortunate that if I wanted to, I could train 7 days a week. And out of that 7 days a week, I can train as much as 3 times a day if I wanted to because of the schedule here at Koa Martial Arts. That doesn't work for everybody. Not all gyms offer that. So with that being said, you have to kind of play with your schedule, whether it be a work schedule, whether it be your family schedule, as well as a schedule at the gym to see if the place you train offers that many classes. But I would say if you're just, a hobbyist, you just want to pick up jiu-jitsu as a hobby, or you just want to train jiu-jitsu, not really focusing on competition, I would say at a minimum twice a week, maybe 3 times a week if you can make it to that open mat that I mentioned. But at a minimum, you want to be in there twice a week. With that said, adding in my strength training, which I also do, my schedule overall kind of looks like Monday. If I don't do a jiu-jitsu class Monday morning, I am doing strength training in my house. I'm fortunate enough to have, a pretty much a full gym setup in my garage. I have free weights, I have dumbbells, I have kettlebells, assault bike, rower, you name it, I pretty much have it. So I'm fortunate enough to not have to go anywhere. I can roll out of bed, go in my garage, and do everything I need to do strength training. And there's no shortage of pavement around me to run on if I need to run. So Monday morning is a strength training. If I'm not preparing for competition and I don't train jiu-jitsu in the morning, Monday morning will be strength training. Monday evening would be a jiu-jitsu class if I need to train in the evening, or vice versa. I do Jiu jitsu in the morning. The school here offers a 5:30 jiu jitsu class, which not all schools offer. But I train jiu jitsu 5:30 in the morning. Then I would do a strength training in the afternoon. But for the most part, when I'm stepping it up, preparing for a competition, I'm doing 2 a days, 5 times a week to prepare for that. So that's Monday. Same thing on Tuesday. Like I said before, I teach the Nogi class Tuesday evening. So that's a given. I'm going to train jiu-jitsu in the evening. To supplement that strength training wise, same thing, I would do my strength training slash cardio Tuesday morning, allowing myself, like 12 hours, 12 to 14 hours sometime to recover before I'm hitting that second session in the evening. For me on Wednesdays, I normally try to take Wednesday off. And when I say off, it's an active recovery day. So on Wednesdays, I stretch, I foam roll, I do yoga. If I need to do something just to get my body moving, I'll jump on the Peloton and do 30 to 45 minutes on the Peloton just to get my body sweating, get my body moving around. But I keep it very light. No weights. Like I said, if I do anything, it's going to be a lot of stretching, a lot of foam rolling, a lot of trigger point therapy using the Thorogun or lacrosse ball, or I do some light cardio, whether it be Peloton or maybe jump in the pool and swim. For me, that helps me jump back on, the 2 a days on Thursday. So Thursday, same thing in the morning. I do my strength training in the morning. And then again, Thursday evening, I'm teaching a Nogi class. So it's a given. I'm going to train jiu-jitsu. For Fridays right now, because I'm preparing for a couple tournaments coming up, Friday mornings, I would jump in that 5:30 gi class, jiu-jitsu class. Again, giving myself some time to recover. And then Friday evening, I do some heavy cardio. So whether it be a longer run, whether we jump on the rower, 30, 45 minutes, the assault bike, I try to get a harder cardio session in on Friday. And then on Saturday, like I mentioned, is that open mat. Again, in open mat, I'm looking to get as many rounds in as possible. I think kind of mentally, I shoot for at least 8 to 10 rounds, 8 to 10 rounds with different people. But I'm there normally for 2 hours rolling, in that I'll take some breaks, sip some water, but I try to stay moving, try to get as many rounds in as I can on that Saturday session. And then on Sunday, again, as a rest day, another active recovery, stretching, foam rolling, or something light if I need to get the body moving. Then after Sunday, rinse and repeat, do the same thing the next week. I may change up the days that I'm training jiu-jitsu if I'm able to, train jiu-jitsu in the evening or train in the morning or vice versa with my lift. Sometimes I'll switch up, but ultimately I'm pretty much doing 2 a days every day that I train throughout the week, which is normally 5 days. To go in a little more detail about the workout routine, most of my strength training is for the most part like hit training. So high intensity. I use a lot of kettlebells. I use a lot of barbells. I do a lot of stuff that requires movements that are similar to movements in jiu-jitsu. So all of my strength training and my cardio for me helps to reinforce some of the movements, the endurance that I need for jiu-jitsu. So with that being said, like I said, I use a lot of kettlebells. Kettlebells are a good way to isolate different muscle groups. If you have one kettlebell in each hand as you're moving, you're able to break down and isolate your muscles more so than when you use a barbell. The time that I shoot for when I'm working out, anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. I use a watch to kind of set a timer, and then from there, I'm focusing on my heart rate. I do a lot of monitoring of my heart rate. Every time I do strength training or cardio, I try to make sure I have either my watch on that tracks my heart rate, or either I'll use the band, the chest strap, that also monitors my heart rate. For me, I like to pay attention to reaching my lactic threshold. So I won't go over the formula for calculating your lactic threshold. But if you go on Google, type in a formula for calculating your lactic threshold, you'll get like a generic formula. But the best way to know more precise what your lactic threshold is to find out what your max heart rate is and find out what your resting heart rate is. Your max heart rate, if you have a Garmin watch, whenever you do like a hard workout, it'll tell you, the max heart rate. I think the standard for the calculation is like 196. But I've been able to get mine over 200 a couple of times, so it adjusts your lactic threshold. And then my resting heart rate, or your resting heart rate, the best way to find that is when you wake up first thing in the morning, or again, if you have a Garmin watch, it'll tell you, first thing in the morning when you wake up what your resting heart rate is. And mine is about 45 beats per minute. So that's kind of rounding out my strength training. For cardio, I mentioned before, I use the assault bike a lot. I'm a huge fan of doing intervals on the assault bike. The rower, those two different muscle groups. The rower is working more, back and pulling. The assault bike is more so pushing. You're pushing with your feet as you're pushing down to turn the pedals. You're pushing with your arms, kind of back and forth, pushing and pulling, more so a little bit pushing to get the momentum moving of the assault bike. You can also add in some runs. Again, there's no shortage of pavement, concrete or trails around here where I live to get out and get some miles in. That's always beneficial. Full body workout, going out for a run. Summertime, I would swim a lot more. The pool here, access to the pool was a lot easier as it's shifting to autumn and a little harder to get out and swim. I just kind of increase more either running, rowing, or on the assault bike. So those are the things that I use to supplement. I'm going into a little more detail about training at Jiu jitsu. Every time I go to train, I have a plan. What I mean by that is I know which position I want to work on. Maybe I want to work on a specific submission. I also go in with kind of a pre-established mindset of how hard I'm going to train. There are days I'll go in and I'll just focus on technique and I won't spar. I won't roll at the end. There are some days I'll go in, I'll work on technique, and I'll try to see how many rounds I can get in, and I'll work a specific position. I think early out, people starting early out in jiu-jitsu, they get overwhelmed, maybe a little bit of overtraining, which leads to them getting injured, and kind of leads to them kind of quitting the sport kind of early. But I think if you kind of stick to maybe 2 to 3 times a week, and in those 2 to 3 times a week, maybe pay attention to the level of intensity when you're overall training. That level of intensity can minimize the number of injuries you have. Also, the number of times a week you're training can minimize injuries because you have more time to recover, especially if you're doing some strength training, heavy cardio outside of jiu-jitsu. You can run into some overuse issues. So again, going in with a plan, going in with a specific set of positions or submissions that you want to work on will help you focus your training. If you go in with the mindset of I'm just going to kind of go in and try everything, one, mentally, you may not be able to keep up with all of the techniques that you're reviewing, you've been going over for the last couple of weeks. Two, you may not retain a whole lot of it. So again, here at the spot I train at, they focus on one position for the entire month. I think that's very beneficial for people who are just starting out. September happens to be the month of half guard. So a lot of attacks, a lot of sweeps, a lot of submissions, transitions from half guard, which helps out, especially the new person coming in who hasn't trained jiu-jitsu before. It gives them a position to focus on. From there, you can branch out to different positions. So I think having a plan in place like that definitely helps out, helps you to focus on your training, helps you to remember what it was that you did in training after you leave. When I leave, I try to always, on the ride home, I always try to review what we did in class that day or what I taught that day. What are ways I can help to make the technique better? What are ways I can help specific students with different body types move a little better or finish the submission or the transition to a different position? All of those things, I think focusing on those details help you out in the long run. So that's kind of what works for me. So to provide a quick recap, if you're training jiu-jitsu, you don't have to sacrifice your strength training. I highly encourage you to incorporate your strength training into your overall training schedule for jiu-jitsu. I would highly encourage you to ensure that you keep the cardio outside of jiu-jitsu into your overall training plan. I would encourage you to take breaks throughout the week, factor in a rest or recovery day, whether it be a true recovery day where you do nothing, or it's an active recovery day where you just minimize your training. You focus on stretching, you focus on foam rolling, you focus on light movements just to keep your body fluid, to keep your body loose. Overall training schedule and intensity, I recommend if you're just starting out, 2 to 3 times a week. Ensure you have some space in between there to recover. In addition to training jiu-jitsu, highly encourage again for you to do strength training in the gaps between jiu-jitsu, and also highly encourage to incorporate some type of cardio conditioning. For those who've been at it for a while, you're going to naturally want to train more. Encourage you to train more. The only thing is I would ensure you're factoring in rest and recovery days so you don't have any overuse injuries or you don't get burnt out from training jiu-jitsu or overall just physical training. When it comes to the intensity level, if you factor in what your lactic threshold is, again, you can Google the formula for your lactic threshold. If you plan to train 4 or 5 times a week or more, I would highly encourage that during the time you're training, you only go over your lactic threshold, 2 to 3 times a week. The rest of the times you try to stay under your lactic threshold. That way you minimize your overuse injuries. That way you enable your body to recover a lot quicker for the following week of training. And if you're preparing for a tournament, odds are you've been training for a while. You got a pretty good routine. Again, I would just encourage to add some recovery time in, no matter if you're training 2 to 3 times a week or you're training 5 or 6 times or 5 or 6 days a week, multiple times a day. I still encourage to add in some type of recovery so that your body's able to keep up with your level of training, your intensity in training. And the last piece I'll add in, just have a plan when you go to train. Have a purpose for your training. It's hard to just starting out to know what's going to be covered in the class, but you can absolutely go in with the mindset of this is my level of intensity. I'm going to focus on technique today. I may stick around to do some free sparring at the end to reinforce the techniques, or I may not do that. I may just go in for technique, drill the technique, and leave. That can be a part of your recovery. Some gyms, some people think that it's frowned upon in gyms to not stick around and roll. At the end of the day, it's on you. You can absolutely stick around to roll. Any gyms that I've been a part of, nobody's going to pressure you into sticking around a free spar. In fact, if you don't think you are ready to free spar, most of the gyms that I've been a part of will encourage you to sit around and just kind of watch the free sparring until you're comfortable to do so. But at some point, you're going to want a free spar to reinforce what you're learning, as well as to test yourself to see if you're able to apply what you've been taught. Again, this is what's worked for me. This has worked for me continuously. This has worked for me in all the gyms that I've been a part of and training. This has worked for me when I was just kind of training. Again, I categorize it as a hobbyist, not so much preparing for competition, just staying consistent, staying active in jiu-jitsu. And again, I've been able to step it up when I've been preparing for competition, preparing to get some heavy rounds in a competition. This has also worked for me.